Welcome to the Books of Titans podcast hosted by Eric Rostad. Join him on his 15-year journey through the immortal books. He'll share what he's learning, explore profound ideas across time and cultures, and share the one thing he always hopes to remember from each immortal book.
Hello, a quick introduction to this episode here. During February 2025, I'm going to repost some of my favorite episodes or some of the episodes that were downloaded the most over the past 7 years. So each year I start by reading straight through the Bible, and that's the part of the year I'm in right now. I select a different translation every time, and then I set aside January and February to go from Genesis to Revelation, and then every other year I add the Apocrypha in between the Old and the New Testaments. So I started this practice in 2020, and then during that time I recorded a podcast covering one of the 66 books of the Bible, the Book of Proverbs, which is mostly attributed to King Solomon. So I had an epiphany that year in 2020 in regards to a main theme that I found in the Proverbs, which is the fear of the Lord. I didn't know what to make of that, but I learned something about it, and then I shared it in that podcast episode, the episode that you're about to listen to here. So this is a repost of that episode. I'm taking February to do that, and then this was originally posted, believe it or not, exactly 5 years ago on February 7th, 2020. So right before things got COVID crazy. So if you listen to the end, I'll share a little bit of what I've learned about the fear of the Lord since this original podcast episode. The Book of Proverbs has become a really big focal point for this reading project in terms of thinking about direction and this idea of the fear of the Lord and what does that even mean. So the Book of Proverbs itself, sometimes before I start reading whatever I'm reading in the morning, I'll pick a proverb. There are 31 proverbs, so many times I'll just pick whatever day of the month it is. So if it's February 5th, I would read Proverbs 5 for that day. So it's a book I return to a lot during the year, and it's one that's really become a focal point for this reading project, just in the ideas that are contained within it. So I hope you enjoyed this episode. It's something that has had a big impact on me during this reading project, and here we go. Hello, this is Eric Rostad, coming to you right outside of Nashville, Tennessee. Today I'm going to cover the Book of Proverbs by King Solomon. The Book of Proverbs is one of the 66 books that comprise the Bible. And the Bible is the first book on my reading list for this year. So I'm going to be reading 52 total books, and I started off with an 1,800-page book, the Bible. Now, if you have a Bible in front of you and you just put your finger kind of right in the middle and open it up, you're going to be in Proverbs or very close to Proverbs. So the Book of Proverbs is almost smack dab right in the center of the book, and after reading it, I thought, I should do an episode on the Book of Proverbs. My plan had been to just wait until I finished the Bible and then to do an episode covering main themes, main ideas I saw throughout all the books of the Bible. But after reading Proverbs, it was similar to some of the other books that I've read for this Books of Titans project, in the sense that it's wisdom literature. But also, I got a lot out of it this time in reading it. And this is the first time I've read the Bible straight through, but it's also the first time I've read Proverbs in such a short period of time. I've read Proverbs a lot over my lifetime, but it's usually either over a month or over as part of a planned reading throughout the whole year. So this was the first time I've read it in a short amount of time, and I got some unique things out of it doing it that way. This is the 100th episode of the podcast. The 100th book that's been covered on the podcast. So there are more than 100 episodes, because some of the episodes I talk about how to read more, how to remember what you read, how to create a reading list, and then podcast about how this project got started. But this is actually the 100th book that I've covered. And so I was actually wanting to wait too to have the 100th book be the Bible, but I just couldn't pass it up. So I want to discuss Book of Proverbs today. If you're unfamiliar with the Books of Titans project, I started reading this reading project in 2017 after reading Tools of Titans by Tim Ferriss. In that book, he interviews top performers from around the world, and he asks them a number of questions, but he asks them what their favorite book is and what their most gifted book is. Now, a lot of these top performers have read a ton of books, and so they have a hard time identifying favorite books, but when it's more rubber meets the road of what did you actually buy for other people, for your friends, for family members, they can usually come up with a list of books they've given as gifts quite often. So when I was reading Tools of Titans, I made a list of those books. It turned out to be 120 plus books. And then from there, I chose 52 of those to read in 2017. Now, since 2017, I've continued on reading 52 different books per year. And now I get suggestions from all over the place. But that first initial year was just books suggested on the Tim Ferriss Show podcast, really, because that book was a compilation of different podcast episodes. So now there have been 400 different episodes of the Tim Ferriss Show podcast, and I keep a running list of all the books that have been suggested. No one has ever suggested the Book of Proverbs. And maybe it's because it's part of a bigger book of the Bible. And so there have been some people who have suggested the Bible, and I'll mention who they are later in this episode, but no one's actually ever mentioned just the Book of Proverbs, just to read through the Book of Proverbs. So I found that interesting. I mean, there's a ton of people who have suggested reading Seneca, Marcus Aurelius, and other in that genre of wisdom literature. And in 2017, I read Maxims and Reflections, and then also the Shortness of Life by Seneca. So we discussed those on the podcast. So there have been other books in this vein, but the Book of Proverbs is much older than these other ones by Seneca and Marcus Aurelius. Book of Proverbs is almost 3,000 years old now. So it's a neat book, and as I said, reading it this time, I got a lot out of it. So I'm going to share some of that in this episode. And here's the structure for this episode. The first segment will be an introduction to the book, who the author is, who suggested it, in terms of who suggested reading the Bible from the Tim Ferriss Show podcast, and then my initial reaction to reading it this time. The second segment, I'll cover some proverbs that you've probably heard before, that are kind of in our cultural knowledge, and we hear them a lot. And then also some of the proverbs that I enjoy. And then just some other themes that I saw kind of weave throughout the book. Segment 3 is going to be my one key takeaway, my one thing. And I usually end out the podcast with this. It's the one thing that I always hope to remember from this book. So let's start. Let's go into segment 1 here. King Solomon, he is the author of the Book of Proverbs. He is David's son, and that's David as in David and Goliath, and David and Bathsheba, if you are familiar with those stories. Bathsheba is Solomon's mother, and King Solomon reigned over Israel from 970 to 931 BC or BCE. So it's almost 3,000 years ago. He is most famous for what he asked God for. So he was having a dream. God appeared to him in this dream and asked him for whatever he wanted. And Solomon replied with this. He said, I want a receptive heart to judge your people and to discern between good and evil. Now, most people say he asked for wisdom, and he did, but the longer version of that was a receptive heart to judge your people and to discern between good and evil. When he asked the Lord that, the Lord was very pleased with that request, because it wasn't for more money or to kill all of his enemies. It was for this wise and discerning heart. And so the Lord replied, I will give you a wise and understanding heart. And then he also blessed him with material abundance and all sorts of things. So King Solomon is known as being the wise king. So he's a good person to have written the Book of Proverbs. He didn't exactly write all of it. So in Proverbs, we get this the connotation that it's also a collection of wise sayings of the time. So it's not necessarily that Solomon wrote all of these, but that they were all collected and put together. Now, something else that King Solomon is known for is his famous judgment. And this is the judgment of Solomon. 2 women come up in front of Solomon, and they have one child between them. And both women are claiming that this is their child. One of the other children was killed during the night, where the woman rolled over on them, I guess, and suffocated the child. So there's one child. Both women are saying, this is my child. And Solomon says, all right, bring me the baby and bring me a sword, and I'm going to chop this child in half, and then you can each have half of the child. And for many years, I didn't really understand why that was so wise. It kind of seemed obvious, but I think actually reading some of the other books for this reading project has helped me understand maybe why that was so wise. And I think what happened is Solomon hit the unconscious of both of these women. He didn't need to hear what they said after he made that comment, because it was probably written all over both of their faces before they even said a word. So the woman whose child it actually was probably recoiled in horror. And then the woman who it wasn't her child was probably had this facial expression of, then we both don't get a child. So it's probably immediately clear, but it tapped into an unconscious response. Like if both women are claiming with their voices, this is my child, you've got to tap into something else other than what they're saying in front of you. And it reminded me of the scene in the book About Face by Colonel Hackworth that was on the 2017 reading list for this project. And he used to do interviews. He was trying to find generals or people to serve with him. And so him and another of his colleagues would conduct these interviews. And his Hackworth's colleague would be handling a grenade in his hand. And they had taken out all the gunpowder and the dangerous parts of the grenade. Like it wasn't going to blow up, but the person being interviewed didn't know that. And so Hackworth is asking this interviewee questions, and the colleague is over on the side just kind of fumbling around with this grenade. And the pin is pulled on the grenade, and as long as it's in your hand, it's okay. But the colleague drops the grenade on purpose in these interviews. The interviewee has no idea that this is not a live grenade. And so Hackworth wants to see what this interviewee does in that situation. Like there's no time to think. A grenade's going to go off in 3 seconds. What does this person do? If the person jumps on it, they don't want him because that's it's suicidal in a way, and not the type of person that they need for this command. If the person picks it up and throws it out of the room quickly, then that's the person they want. If the person just freezes, they know that's not the right person. But they have tapped into an unconscious. The person does not. The interviewee does not have enough time to sit there and think through the options. It's the unconscious response, the training over a lifetime of what that person is going to do. And that, I think, is what Solomon got in this judgment, is that he tapped into something that was immediate, that the women probably didn't have any control over how they responded. But when he said that, I'm just going to cut the child in half and then you can each have half, it tapped into that. Solomon, the other main thing he is known for is having an abundance of wives. He had 700 wives and 300 concubines. I have one wife, and marriage is hard. And you multiply that by 700 and then throw in 300 other concubines. Can you imagine? I just go to my business training and think of the logistics of this all. Like, how do you even remember their names? And then a lot of these wives were foreign wives, so they probably had crazy names. Like, how you probably have to have a team of people just trailing you all day as you walk around your palace and come across your wives to remind you, oh, hey, this is Jane. This is Judy. You guys have 2 kids together. One kid is in karate. They don't have karate then. Whatever. But like, think of all that would go into that. And that does not seem wise to me. So Solomon is known as the most wise person. I'm just going to go with that. But the 700 wives and 300 concubines, that does not seem wise. But anyway, the foreign wives whole thing, he was not supposed to be marrying foreign wives. They led his heart astray, and that ended up being the downfall of Solomon as well as Israel. The kingdom split after Solomon amongst his sons, and was never the same after that. So he had all those wives and concubines, but it was not really a good thing. As for the Book of Proverbs itself, as I mentioned, is right in the center of the Bible. It was originally written in Hebrew. There are 31 chapters, and it comes right after the Book of Psalms. It is wisdom literature, and the connotation is that these are collected sayings of the wise. And Solomon did not write all of them. There are even some proverbs written by someone else, and I'll mention that in the next part here. Proverbs is a book of contrasts, and it's important to keep that in mind as you read it. Some of the contrasts are right next to each other, and some of them are chapters apart. So you might read one proverb that reads a certain way, and then later on you read another one that's kind of the other side of the coin. But there's also proverbs that are just 2 lines long. They're one sentence, and the first part is, the good thing, and then the second part is the wrong way to live. Solomon also wrote Ecclesiastes and Song of Songs, also known as the Song of Solomon, which are also books of the Bible. So the sections, the way Proverbs is broken down, Proverbs 1 through 9 it's kind of like a father talking to his son. Like, here is the wise way to live, son. Go and do this. There's also sections where wisdom is personified. It's personified as a woman. Wisdom is calling out to the inexperienced. Wisdom is out there for the taking, but you have to pursue it on your side as well. So that's Proverbs 1 through 9. Proverbs 10 through 22 and a half are these pithy statements contrasting right and wrong ways to live. So for example, here's one: idle hands make one poor, but diligent hands bring riches. So you have the wrong way to live on the top, idle hands make one poor. You have the right way to live on the bottom, but diligent hands bring riches. Proverbs 22 and a half to 29 are these continuation of these short, pithy statements, but then also some longer form content. Proverbs 25, at the beginning of that, the statement says, "These are Proverbs of Solomon, which the men of King Hezekiah of Judah copied." And King Hezekiah was king between 716 and 687 BCE. So that's like 150, 200 years after Solomon. So it's kind of cool to think that these proverbs were still being discussed at the royal court, that they're being read and talked about and copied and put together, and so that's just a neat part of Proverbs, that here are another 4 chapters or so that are just the collected sayings of Solomon. And then Proverbs 30, it says it's written by Agur, son of Jakeh. And then Proverbs 31 of King Lemuel. And Proverbs 31 is the proverb about a wife of noble character. As for who suggested Proverbs, no one suggested it, but there have been some people who have suggested the Bible on the Tim Ferriss Show podcast. And they are Stephen Dubner, Ricardo Semler, Ryan Flattery, Sam Harris, AJ Jacobs, and Katarina Fake. I read Proverbs between January 31st and February 1st of 2020. So over those 2 days, it took me 3 hours, 4 minutes, and 34 seconds. In my version of the Bible, there were 57 pages, so that was 29 pages per day. I always like to contrast the time it took me to read with what is the average amount of time the average American spends watching TV a day. And that number is 4.5 hours. Now you combine that or probably add to it with time spent on the phone, and you could easily get through the Proverbs in a day if you just put your phone down and didn't watch any TV. So around the 3 hour mark, and you can get through this entire book. As for my initial reaction, I was really impressed. I've read Proverbs countless times in my life, but I've never read it all together like this in a relatively short amount of time, just over two quick days. So Proverbs is 31 chapters. So I've done a lot in the past where I'll just read one proverb a day for a month, or it'll be part of a reading plan for the Bible for the entire year. So you might read a proverb and then read another one 2 weeks later, read another one further on. So this is the first time I've ever read it together. And in reading it together like this, it really helps you to see common themes, repeated proverbs, ideas that really stick out. And I'm sure some people, if they read it over a long period of time, they would be able to put that all that together. But for me, reading it in a compact time period like that really helped me to see those connections more. As for who should read the book, it's one of those, I mean, everyone should read it. It's nearly 3,000 years old. It's wisdom literature. There are things that each sentence you could just sit and think about it for a long time. So it could be one of those books where it just sits in a place where it's easily accessible, and then you have a minute here or there, you could pick it up, just read a proverb and meditate on it for a while, think about it for a while. Or it's one that you can read through the whole thing and see common themes and common ideas. So if you're into wisdom literature, if you like Marcus Aurelius, if you like Seneca, give the Book of Proverbs a try as well. I'm actually surprised it's not one that's suggested more. I'm going to read the introduction to Proverbs here. I am using the Christian Standard Bible version translation. Here it goes. The Proverbs of Solomon, son of David, king of Israel, for learning wisdom and discipline, for understanding insightful sayings, for receiving prudent instruction in righteousness, justice, and integrity, for teaching shrewdness to the inexperienced, knowledge and discretion to a young man. Let a wise person listen and increase learning, and let a discerning person obtain guidance. For understanding a proverb or a parable, the words of the wise and their riddles. That ends the introduction there. It's quite an intro. Here are 6 proverbs you probably heard at some point in your life. The first one: there is a way that seems right to a person, but its end is the way of death. Here's another one: a gentle answer turns away anger, but a harsh word stirs up wrath. This is probably the most famous one here. Pride comes before destruction. Other translations will have it, pride comes before the fall. Another one: the borrower is slave to the lender. If you've ever listened to Dave Ramsey, that's like his life verse. Another one: iron sharpens iron, and one person sharpens another. And number 6: who can find a wife of noble character? She is far more precious than jewels. Here are 6 proverbs I really like. The first one: where there are no oxen, the feed trough is empty, but an abundant harvest comes through the strength of an ox. I like that because another translation, I think it has more the connotation of if there are no oxen, you don't have to clean up their crap. But an abundant harvest comes through the strength of an oxen. So there's responsibility with having an ox, but there's also the potential for abundant harvest. And so if you don't move forward with that, there are going to be unpleasantries associated with cleaning up after an ox, but there is also abundant harvest that comes through the strength of an ox. A lot of different ways to think about that in your life. Another one: a fool does not delight in understanding, but only wants to show off his opinions. Now I would say that's pretty much social media today. Don't eat a stingy person's bread, and don't desire his choice food, for it's like someone calculating inwardly. That one's just funny to me. I don't think other translations put it that way, of somebody calculating inwardly. But if you've been around someone who maybe they're paying for the meal or something like that, and you can just kind of see in their head, like everything you order, ooh, that was a $3 drink. Ooh, that appetizer. You just kind of is someone calculating inwardly. I loved how that translation put it there. Another one. This one's funny. Don't answer a fool according to his foolishness, or you'll be like him yourself. Answer a fool according to his foolishness, or he'll become wise in his own eyes. So in this one little statement here, don't answer a fool according to his foolishness, and then answer a fool according to his foolishness. And that some of the proverbs are like that, and I think it's cool because you think about it one way, but then here's the opposite side of the coin. And don't answer a fool, but answer a fool. And if you need to do either one, here's the best way to do it. Another one: a lying tongue hates those it crushes, and a flattering mouth causes ruin. So some of the proverbs do that. It makes you think of things in a new way. Have you ever thought of a lie being a lying tongue hating? Like if you lie to somebody, you are hating them. A lying tongue hates those it crushes. And then, especially when you contrast it with this proverb, he who gives an honest answer gives a kiss on the lips. So a lying tongue hates those it crushes, and an honest answer is like a kiss on the lips. When you're giving a lying answer, it seems to appease the situation. But if you're giving an honest answer, sometimes that will, in the short term, make things bad for you. But the proverb here is that it is like an honest answer gives a kiss on the lips. And there are a number of other proverbs that, you can trust somebody that gives an honest answer, and that is a true friend, and along those kind of lines. But just the lying tongue hating those it crushes, and then contrasting that with these verses about honest answers. Very interesting. And the last one here, it kind of along the lines of self-help. The one who trusts in himself is a fool, but one who walks in wisdom will be safe. I just think that's funny because a lot of the books we have now are self-help books, and they're how to trust yourself and how to believe in yourself. And here's this proverb: the one who trusts in himself is a fool, but one who walks in wisdom will be safe. Those are the 6 proverbs I really liked while reading through it. Here are some themes that I saw throughout Proverbs. One is justice and kindness to the poor. And back to this idea of there being contrast throughout Proverbs, kindness to the poor is contrasted with oppression. And then justice, there are different sides of justice. So there's the one proverb: acquitting the guilty and condemning the just, both are detestable to the Lord. Sometimes we'll hear of the innocent person being condemned, and the focus being on that, but here's one: acquitting the guilty. So letting the guilty go free and condemning the just are both detestable to the Lord. So just again, that both sides of the coin. And if you've been aware of a situation where someone commits a terrible wrong against somebody, and the lasting influence is that the wrong committed against that person lasts a long time, but then the person who committed the wrong kind of gets off free, it just irks you, right? I mean, so I love that both sides of it are accounted for in these proverbs. Another one along these lines is: kindness to the poor is a loan to the Lord, and he will give a reward to the lender. Kindness to the poor is a loan to the Lord. That's an amazing thing to think about. Just the deeds done to the poor, it extends beyond just to that person. Another idea that comes up, and one that we've discussed in this podcast, especially when Jason's been on different episodes, is this idea of Chesterton's fence. So G.K. Chesterton, he has this thing where he talks about, if you come across a fence, your first instinct should not be to tear the fence down. If that fence is keeping you from doing something, maybe it's a law. Maybe you don't just go to that law and tear away the law. Maybe first you ask, why was the law there? Why was it put there in the first place? And so Chesterton's fence is, there's a fence there. Don't knock it down first. Ask why it's there first. But there are some proverbs along these same lines of don't move an ancient boundary marker that your fathers set up. And so that came up a few times in Proverbs. Another theme of skilled work and wealth will put you, or skilled work will put you before kings. Skilled work will lead to wealth, diligent hands. And so the one in particular that I like is: a person's gift opens doors for him and brings him before the great. Another theme is the fear of the Lord. I will discuss that in segment 3. And then another theme of pride. I mentioned that one proverb of pride comes before the fall. But then what pride is contrasted against. You have the basic one of pride versus humility, but then there's also pride versus the fear of the Lord. Another theme, weighing motives of the heart. Let me read one here. This is really good. If you say, but we didn't know about this, won't he who weighs hearts consider it? So just as this idea of there's an outward action, but there's also things going on inside. There's your motivations. And what about the motivation behind, what about the responsibility for that, the weighing the motives of your heart in actions and not just the action itself. Another one of having many counselors. There's a lot of proverbs about surrounding, especially leaders surrounding themselves with many counselors to get different viewpoints and to not just go about decisions in a hasty manner. I mentioned a lot of contrasts in the book of Proverbs, and that is an important part of it. One in that beginning section where it's kind of the father talking to the son in about living the wise life. There's wisdom is contrasted against a wayward woman, kind of a prostitute. So wisdom is calling out, and then also the prostitute is calling out. And you get to you choose. You can go the way of wisdom, or you can go the way of the prostitute. And it's just interesting to read these things being contrasted. One paragraph will be about pursuing wisdom. The other one is for the person who pursues the prostitute. And just thinking of that, of the different ways that you can go in life. And these proverbs are dealing with life here. It's how to have an effective life on earth. I kind of think of it as the effective earthling, in contrast to the effective executive by Peter Drucker. It's how to live an effective life and in a wise life, and to pursue the path of wisdom and not to go down the other path. There's a decision at every point in your life for those things. One other thing here I wanted to highlight in this second segment is, as I was reading Proverbs, I would write book titles, I would write movies, I would write things that came to mind for particular Proverbs. Life experience, people. I would write people's names next to some of the Proverbs, and that was an amazing thing, especially the ones where I wrote books next to them, because some of the most profound books for this Books of Titans project have been those that are about suffering, like the Gulag Archipelago, Man's Search for Meaning. And those are two books that I wrote next to Proverbs. And those Proverbs encapsulated the main points of those books. And in those books, you saw people do things suggested in Proverbs, and the result was almost otherworldly, in the sense that in the midst of hell, in Man's Search for Meaning, in the midst of hell, there were some people that rose above that and they survived. In the Gulag Archipelago, there were people that rose above the mindset of just being the prisoner, and they rose above to know that their soul was being developed in the Gulag. How does that come about? It was fascinating to me to see those connections and to see a whole book being written about these proverbs in a way of here's a proverb of how it's suggested to live, and then here are these books where someone did live that way, and the result was unbelievable and very impactful. Now on to segment 3 and the one thing, my one key takeaway from the Book of Proverbs. Right after that intro that I read earlier, we have the statement that starts off Proverbs, and it goes like this: "The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. Fools despise wisdom and discipline." Other translations have it, "The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom." That's how I've most commonly heard that right after the intro. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. Now, what in the world is the fear of the Lord? Is it fear like trembling fear of just losing all the color of your face and just being pale white in fear and fright? Is that the beginning of wisdom? What does that look like? What does that mean? And so I read that the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and I just kind of made a mental note That's on the first page of Proverbs. And I decided I'm not going to look at Google. I'm not going to ask knowledgeable friends what this means. I'm just going to make a note of that, and I'm going to read through the rest of Proverbs and see if what is this, if that question is answered later on. And it was answered in a way that I wasn't expecting, because there are a number of other verses that start off with the fear of the Lord is such and such, but none of those really helped me understand it either. But what helped me understand it is when I got to Proverbs 29, and there's a verse that says this: "The fear of mankind is a snare, but the one who trusts in the Lord is protected." That first part really stuck out to me. The fear of mankind is a snare. And we're talking about Proverbs here with this idea of contrast, of continual contrast. So here is the contrast I think I was waiting for to understand deeper what the fear of the Lord meant. Because the fear of the Lord, I just couldn't, I didn't understand what that meant. But I understand very well the fear of mankind, because I live that every day. I fear people. I think we all do to some extent. We fear what people think. We fear what they say against us, what they say about us. We fear how what we said was taken by them, how they view us. I know I fear other people's displeasure. So if I've displeased somebody in a certain way, and so what is the result of that? The fear of people is a snare. The fear of people is going to lead you to do things that are not wise. That's not the path of wisdom. Contrast that to the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. That helped it click for me and helped it make sense, because I know what fear of mankind looks like. What if I can translate that to the fear of the Lord? What if instead of caring what mankind, what people think, and being ensnared in that constantly, what if that shifts to the fear of the Lord? And what if that is the beginning of wisdom, as it says here? This kind of goes in deeper into how I've approached this entire first book of my list this year of reading through the Bible. I have just a ton of questions as I'm reading the Bible, and I'm not stopping to get the answer. Sometimes, like if I'm reading another book, I'll put the book down, I'll go to Google, figure out what's going on, and then go back to the book. But what I'm trying to do is write the questions I have in the margin and then just leave them there and see if the answer is there later in the Bible, if it's even later in that particular book of the Bible. And here is one instance where that helped, and that way of going about the reading of it helped me to see something I probably wouldn't have noticed if I had just gone right to Google or asking a knowledgeable friend of what in the world does the fear of the Lord mean. And so I love that. That is my one thing. That is something I'll always remember from this particular reading of the Bible, that the fear of mankind is a snare. I know all about the fear of people and of what that leads me to do. What if I can now shift that? What if that can be shifted to the fear of the Lord? That'll help me understand what the fear of the Lord is. So I love that happened. And that'll be an easy one thing for me to remember, because it was one of those light bulb moments when I read that. To recap, Book of Proverbs is wisdom literature. It's a book you can read through like I did, where you just read it straight through, or it's one that you can just sit and chew on sentence by sentence. It could be a book you pick up each morning and just read one proverb and think about it and kind of have it on your mind the entire day and just be thinking on it the entire day. Or it's one that you can read through quickly and gather themes and ideas that weave throughout throughout the book. I'd suggest reading it. As I mentioned, it took me 3 hours, and I was going quite slowly and underlining and writing a lot of notes. So you could probably read it in less than 3 hours. But it packs a punch. It's going to make you think, and it might be the key to pursuing knowledge and pursuing wisdom. Well, hey, it's 2025. Eric back again here, and just wanted to share a little something at the end of this episode. So this idea of the fear of the Lord really struck me in 2020, as you just heard in this episode, but it mainly struck me on an intellectual level. But last year in 2024, I kicked off the year with an ancient practice that our church was suggesting and participating in, and that is that I fasted. So I limited my food intake over a period of 21 days for the purpose of a spiritual quest of sorts. And so the way that this one was broken up is the first 7 days, you don't eat at all. You could have drinks. The second week is 1 meal a day. And then the third week is 2 meals a day back into, after that 21 days, then you go back to normal. And I journaled during this practice and during those 21 days. And on the fourth day, just 4 days into this, so I started January 1st, January 4th, something deep changed within me. And it was like the idea of the fear of the Lord became a reality in the sense that I lost a good chunk of that fear of humankind. And I still notice it to this day. Things that used to make me freeze, I would get scared just thinking about talking to people, and then about confrontational items or topics. During the conversations, I would just be shaking, and it's gone. There's still little traces of it, but it's like it was pretty much stripped away, and it was stripped away rapidly, and just to nowhere near the levels that it was before. And so that may seem or sound very strange and weird to you, but I wanted to share it here just because there are different levels of reading and comprehension. And so there's the intellectual assent, and I had that in 2020. I finally understood, what to a small degree, what is the fear of the Lord, and understanding that in contrast to the fear of humankind. But there was this very real spiritual heart change, not just assent, that occurred, and it occurred 4 years later. So that's a long time, but it went, I guess, from my head to my heart. And I will never forget that. I may have forgotten the intellectual or the idea that was there, but when something changes that drastically inside of you, like I will never, ever forget that. And so, yeah, maybe 4 years were required for me to know it and then to deeply experience it. But, and I've never shared this publicly other than just with a few friends. And I share it here just because I think it's so cool. I think it's so amazing how this idea that I found very intriguing could turn into something that it was a big life change for me. And it's to the point where, if I'd gone to therapy or something over this fear, like it would have taken years for that therapist to get to the depths of what happened on the fourth day of doing this fast. And it's like it was such a core issue in my life, and it was identified, it was dealt with. Again, there's still traces of it, but it's like from compared to what it was, it's just it was night and day difference. And I just found that to be astonishing and wanted to share that here because I love that idea of it going from the idea side of things into a very real lived experience thing, a change that was a rapid thing, not just like, okay, I'm trying to shift direction here and think about this in a different way, or even try to practice this in a different way, but it was something that just radically changed in my life. So hope that is encouraging to you guys, and I hope you enjoyed this episode about the Book of Proverbs.